Aloha and welcome to Spirit Chat Radio. So, you may have noticed that I've been doing things a little bit differently. If you're watching me on YouTube, if you're on iTunes, you may not notice, but I decided to just kind of video record my radio sessions because I realized that I talk with my hands a lot and I'm talking to the computer anyways, and people have asked me about it. So, if you're on YouTube, that's what's happening. That's why it's different. So it's not exactly regular YouTube style. It's kind of YouTube slash podcasting style. If you're on iTunes, then you might want to come check me out at YouTube if you want to see more of me talking directly to you, I guess I would say. So, anyways, that's kind of a different format of what I'm doing right now. Today, I'm going to be talking about 4 ways to reach higher consciousness. And the reason that I wanted to go over this subject and how this kind of came about is because I was doing a master class over at my Empath University. And we were talking about spirits and spirit communication and stuff. And higher frequency came out, or not higher frequency, higher consciousness came up. And I thought that this was a really good subject to cover because I realized at that point, which is a lot of why I do my podcasts anyways, I realized at that point that I think that a lot of my students and a lot of the people who I was talking to have a misconception when it comes to higher consciousness. And I think that once you understand it, it's really helpful. Because people talk about higher consciousness all the time, right? You're talking about, how am I going to achieve higher consciousness? Or you're under the impression that you're going to hit this huge euphoric state when you reach higher consciousness, and that it has I guess I would say, the persona of being very high and very hard to get and unreachable. And that's when it hit me when I was doing the master class. I realized that a lot of people are just striving really hard to reach this state, and they're not really understanding what it is that they're trying to reach. And even when I learned about this a really long time ago when I was younger, and I started kind of thinking, what is this that I'm trying to reach? I discovered that I had been reaching it since I was really, really young, but the way that it was described to me, or the way that people were talking about it, made it seem like something very hard to reach, and something that was this version of yourself that was going to be kind of an excruciating journey to get to, and then all of a sudden you have this euphoria going on. And I wanted to address it because that's not the case. So I had asked one of my students, and I've been asking people since then, what do you think that your higher consciousness is? And there's been a lot of really good answers that have come back on this. But a lot of people had said, well, my higher consciousness, I believe, is a state where, I reach that has a lot of my past knowledge in it, maybe my present knowledge, some future knowledge. But it's this higher version of myself, this higher frequency part of myself. And while, yes, this is all very true, but how do you reach this? Which part of yourself is this? Basically, your higher consciousness is your spiritual body, and the frequency that it reaches at a certain part has information of the past, the present, and the future. When you start creating a relationship with your spiritual body, you are right there to having access to your higher consciousness, because your higher consciousness is part of your spiritual body. And that means it's very reachable. Your higher consciousness is actually a part of your spiritual body. That's where your higher consciousness lies. And since it lies as a part of your spiritual body, it's a lot more simple to reach this higher consciousness or to have access to this higher consciousness aspect of yourself than you would think. It's actually a lot more simple than you would think, and you don't have to be a yogi who's practiced for 10 years to reach and have access to your higher consciousness. What you need to do is these 4 things that I'm going to be talking about. So your spiritual body has your higher is part of your higher consciousness. Your spiritual body is where your higher consciousness lies. And like I said, that the part is true where it does have the spiritual knowledge of all of your existences, every part of you that's ever existed from the past, every lifetime you've ever lived. All this knowledge is there in your higher consciousness, right? Your past, your current, your future, access to guides, spiritual knowledge in the spiritual realm, other knowledge that you have when you are not incarnated here that maybe you forgot about. This is all in your higher consciousness memory. It is all right there, and that higher consciousness is part of the spiritual body. So let's talk about the 4 ways that you can reach your higher consciousness. The first one is learning how to create a relationship with your spiritual body. That is extremely, extremely important. And you will do this by actually step 2, which I'm kind of going to talk about a little bit in tandem because they sort of work together. So it's learning how to create a relationship with your spiritual body, learning what your spiritual body feels like, learning how the senses are similar to your physical body in a way that you've probably grown up thinking that, oh, this spiritual body sensation is definitely a physical thing that's going on with me. It's learning how to familiarize yourself with your spiritual body, learning how to understand when you're really tuned into it and what that feels like. And it's not always going to feel just super high frequency and high vibe like euphoria type things. Sometimes your spiritual body, if you are not managing things properly, or sometimes it's trying to give you indications of some things going on, like different spirits going on or being around, or different energies that it's around, it may respond in a way that's not necessarily euphoric feeling, but there will be some physical sensations, or it will feel like physical sensations when you're tuning into your spiritual body. And then the brain, a lot of times, if you're not trained, goes, oh, okay, that's definitely a physical thing here. I'm experiencing this on a physical nature. And so unless you've learned how to create and recognize your spiritual body and create a relationship there, then your physical senses and your brain wants to take over and say, oh, these are all physical aspects of some things that I'm experiencing. And then sometimes you relate those to other things like, oh my gosh, what is wrong with me type of stuff, which may not always be something's wrong with you. You may just be experiencing some different energies and things that is going on with your spiritual body. Now, how you start to create a relationship with your spiritual body is by the second way, which is familiarizing yourself with your spiritual senses. And that is learning how your spiritual senses work. That's learning about your clairsentience, which is your empath stuff. It's learning about your clairvoyance. It's learning about your clairgustance. It's learning about all your clairs, your clairaudience, clairvoyance, everything. So it's familiarizing yourself with your spiritual senses. And I'm sure that you already know this, and you've probably, if you've listened to me, you definitely know this, or you probably know already. You know, you have your physical senses, right? You're seeing, your touch, your smell, and that sort of thing. But you also have your spiritual senses, which can also see and feel, like your clairsentience. That's like your touch, you feel, right? You can see with your spiritual senses, your clairvoyance, your mind's eye. You can hear with your inner ear and your spiritual senses. So you can taste with your spiritual senses. So you can do all of the same physical things on with your spiritual body as well. And that requires learning how to work with your spiritual senses. That requires, sometimes it requires classes or different things of that nature. A lot of times it requires classes. That's also why I created this psychic ability class, but that's a whole nother thing. But anyways, it's learning how to tune in to your spiritual senses, learning to differentiate what your physical senses and sensations are and your spiritual senses and sensations are. And once you start really learning to compartmentalize more physical sensations and spiritual sensations, and that may seem overwhelming if you don't have the proper knowledge, but truthfully, it's not really overwhelming when you do have the proper knowledge. It's fairly simple, but I can't really teach that on this podcast because it's too short. Like I said, my classes that I do, it's like hours and hours of stuff. So it's really a fairly simple process. But learning how to separate and categorize, physical and spiritual. It's learning how your spiritual body operates, how it feels, what information it's getting. How do you know when you're tuned into it? It's familiarizing yourself with your spiritual body. The more you familiarize yourself with it through learning and understanding how your spiritual senses work, then your spiritual body, I've talked about this before, but it's kind of like you're sort of dating with your spiritual body. As you're getting to know your spiritual senses, you'll be able to know a little bit here and see how it works there a little bit, and kind of where your stronger interests lie with your spiritual senses, where you're stronger in. And then the more that you learn to familiarize yourself with what your spiritual body does and all the spiritual senses that it has, and how your specific spiritual senses are working, because everybody has a different combination. You're going to be stronger in some areas than somebody else is going to be in their areas. Once you learn your specific combination and you start acknowledging your spiritual body and going, okay, yep, I'm feeling tuned into you. I'm hearing the vibe you're giving me. I'm getting the signals that you're giving me. Then that relationship is then going to become stronger. And then those vibes and those sensations are going to get stronger, and they're going to be more easily identified. And then you're going to be going, okay, yep, now we're communicating. Now we're creating this dialogue between the two of us. I know what my spiritual body is saying to me. I'm getting very good, stronger communication, and the signal's getting stronger. Once that happens, your spiritual body then starts opening up to you and going, now I know you're listening to me. I get that you're understanding what's happening. So now here's some information that you might want access to. And that's where you really start to reach the higher consciousness stuff, is by creating this relationship with your spiritual body, really respecting what your spiritual body does, acknowledging that it exists. Because a lot of times I've had clients that they'll say, okay, well, I don't know that this information, I'm not really sure where this information is coming from. But I've told my friend that, okay, here's what I'm seeing about this information. And then I've told my friend, or my friend has said, well, how did you get this information? And is it accurate? And I've had a client say, I know it's accurate because I'm usually right on these things. So I gave thanks to my guide or whoever. I said, okay, I'm acknowledging this. Thank you, etc. I explained to them that I know it's accurate. But then they will tell me, but you know what? I'm not really sure if I have this ability. And I'm thinking, so you're dismissing your ability now. Now you're focused upon, yes, I have it. I'm giving thanks. I know it's pretty accurate because I've had these experiences in the past, but I'm not really sure. That's dismissing your gift at that point. That's dismissing an aspect of your being. So it's like saying, well, you don't really exist. I'm not really sure that you exist, or I'm kind of unsure that you exist, so I'm going to keep you in the closet over here. And I don't want to really show you to people because I'm not really sure I'm going to acknowledge your presence yet, but I'm going to utilize these skills. Do you see what I mean? That's not creating a strong relationship with your spiritual body. That's creating sort of a closet relationship with your spiritual body. You're unsure about it. You want to create confidence between your spiritual body and your physical body. You want to create a confident connection between the two. And you want to create confidence with your spiritual body, trusting your physical body and what you're doing with your physical brain and trusting that you're creating this strong bond and relationship there. And then you're creating the whole part of yourself. And so that also comes with activating your spiritual senses. And so after you've learned to create a relationship with your spiritual body and you're learning to acknowledge your spiritual senses, you're learning to categorize them, you're learning to go, okay, yes, this is a real thing. Yes, I want to include you, spiritual body, with things that I'm doing. Yes, I'm getting it. I'm hearing you. We're creating this bonding relationship. Then you want to start working on developing your spiritual senses. Because when you're developing your spiritual senses, you begin to activate them. And now your spiritual body's like, hey, yeah, I want to help you. I want to open up to you. I want to show you what I can do. I want to give you more information now. And so a lot of times, even with spirit contact, you're everybody wants to skip these steps. They want to go straight into, well, I have these things here or there where I'm getting bits and pieces of information and I'm frustrated because I don't know why I'm not. Well, you haven't taken the time to create this solid foundation in this relationship from where your spiritual information is coming from. You haven't created the time, you haven't taken the time to really develop and create a strong communication system there. And so, yes, it's going to be flighty. That's where the information comes from. That's where your spiritual senses bring information to you through. That's where you reach your higher consciousness, which then has information for you. You have to create this relationship and this foundation. So activating your spiritual senses and actually developing in them and using them, that's going to be another extremely important way to reaching your higher consciousness. And then the last one is adapting to spiritual culture and integrating it as part of your life and existence. And that's where I mean, instead of kind of keeping your spiritual self and its senses in the closet and going, I'm not really sure if I believe you, and I'm kind of on the fence, and I'm not really sure I'm ready to acknowledge you yet. That means fully adapting that in as part of your family. Your spiritual body is a part of a whole greater you. You are learning how to trust it. Instead of learning how to distrust it, you're more concentrated and focused upon how can you trust it. Let's create this bonding, trusting relationship. How was I right? How was I accurate? You know what I mean? Everybody discounts it. Well, it probably wasn't this way because of this, and I missed something on that. Well, how were you right? How can you make it? How can you give yourself credit for hearing what your spiritual body was trying to then communicate to you? Where were you right? Where were you accurate? Where were you working together well, as in a good partnership? How did you want to have a positive focus, a positive perspective on your relationship with your spiritual body? And that means including it as part of your actual identity. It means including it and recognizing it as a huge part of your existence. It means it's part of your greater whole, because that's where the knowledge lies. Your spiritual body wants to be acknowledged. It wants to become part of your physical existence. In your physical body and brain would love to have this really strong partnership between both bodies. It really craves it. But if it doesn't have the knowledge to then include it, and it doesn't have the permission to go, yes, this is part of my identity, there's a strength here, there's a knowing here, there's so much more to my existence. It needs to have the knowledge, and it needs to have permission to then include and work with your spiritual body. And you need to claim it as part of your identity and not have it be the redheaded stepchild that's sort of outside of your family, if that makes sense, and just kind of sitting on the side, and you get to include it on some events, right? Sorry about that. That's a loud noise there, but I don't want to re-record this. So anyways, you don't want to include it into just special family events. And that's what happens when you're going, hey, I had this experience. I had this spiritual experience where I had XYZ happen. How cool was that? But then the rest of the time, the rest of your days, you're like, nah, I don't know. It comes and goes. It's kind of flighty. You want to include it in all aspects of your identity, as claim it as part of your identity. So it's understanding that your higher consciousness is very much a part of you currently at this very moment in time. It's very reachable currently at this very moment in time, but it's learning where it is, which lies within your spiritual body. Your higher frequency, your higher consciousness lies within your spiritual body. It's learning how to create this relationship with your spiritual body. It's learning how to familiarize yourself with your spiritual senses, how those work. It's learning how to activate your spiritual senses and develop it and start having a really strong relationship between your spiritual body and your physical body. And then it's claiming your spiritual body as part of your identity. And all of these things will help you to tap into your higher consciousness, which is a natural part of your basically your spiritual body's brain. Your higher consciousness is there, ready and waiting for you. It's not something that's completely out of your reach. So I hope that you found this helpful. Sorry about all the background noise there. If you'd like to know more about what your spiritual senses are, don't forget to take the quiz. Don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this and hit the notification bell. Also, I have a spirit community. You can, it's free if you want to, chit chat with other like-minded people, and or if you want to learn more about developing your spiritual senses, you can check out the Empath You courses. And until next time, I hope you have the most amazing day. Okay, aloha.